culture of colonization that has happened over the years. And since we are mixed, remember this, since we still think we come from that mentality, we think we're going against our daddies. We don't understand that the guy who you got to cut his hand off may very well be part of your family. He just ain't right with you. And you got to deal with that. Now, here's the other problem. The reality is that Christianity has a lot to play with this. Because even though, black folk, listen to me carefully now. Listen to me, beloved, because I'm not coming from anything other than Christian love. It doesn't matter what happened before. It doesn't matter that they did what they did. Your job, our job, is to go out there and recruit, because in the end, we're in this together. Suppose you're more advanced than that little cat on the street who happens to be Joaquin Rodriguez. Suppose you do know you from Africa. Does that keep you from understanding there is an ignorance and a lack of political sophistication? That doesn't mean then you say, well, I'm going to do mine and let them do theirs. You know who did that a few years ago? Jews. There were very sophisticated European Ashkenazi who said, you know what, let the Nazis pick up all those garlic-smelling, all those guys with payasses. We don't care. It doesn't matter. They're putting them into boxcars. They didn't know that they were sealing their own fate. So it doesn't matter that that person, that Latino, is not on your side at this point. Your job, our job, is to organize them anyway. Because if they come for you, if they come for him tonight, they're coming for you tomorrow.
Let's go back to the phone. Let's go to Atlanta, Georgia. Lisa, you're keeping it real with Al Sharpton. Hello?
Hello? I'm sorry. I'm 19 years old, so I really don't know a whole lot, but I'm learning. But I will say this, that I think that Martin Luther King was a wonderful person and a wonderful leader, but I think that we need to recognize there were other leaders as well. Like the brother said, Chavez. I'm sure there were women leaders. I'm sure there were other black male leaders, but we just seem to focus on Martin Luther King. And I think one of the reasons why is because we have allowed white people to tell us who our leaders should be. That's one comment. My second comment is I was watching the news maybe a couple months ago, and there were some Mexicans that were protesting about immigration. But that's all I see. Shouldn't Africans and Koreans and those people from Europe be included in that march as well? For some reason, they think they're not a part of immigration. I have friends from Australia, friends from Africa, and they think that, oh, that's not our fight. But isn't it their fight as well? And I'll listen to your comments off the air.
All right, let me answer the first one.
Yes, sir.
Martin Luther King, Lisa, was one of many leaders. There's no doubt about it. But some leaders embody the times in which they lead. That's just natural. There were many leaders in India, but Gandhi embodied that time. There were many leaders that fought apartheid in South Africa, and many went to jail. But Mandela personified that time. There's nothing wrong with that, because when you honor them, you're honoring all of those leaders, because all of those leaders dealt with the fact that this was the symbol of that time. And don't make any mistake, Lisa. Whites did not make Martin Luther King. They didn't choose Dr. King. Blacks did. Dr. King came out of the black church. He was the leader of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which was an organization of black churches. And even when he died, it was blacks and their white allies and Latino allies that had to fight to make white America make it a federal holiday. White folks didn't jump up and say, let's honor Dr. King. We forced that. Now, 40 years later, many young people think that, or are made to think that, because they see so many white dignitaries honoring Dr. King. That is not what happened. They did not want it. Ronald Reagan, who was president that signed it, had called Dr. King a communist.
Yes, he did.
Many of the whites that are speaking out King, they were against King's dream. So let's not, there is a big difference in those that accept the inevitable than those that ordained and orchestrated it. They had to submit to King and the movement behind him. They didn't sponsor him, didn't like it, and they still don't like it.
And I would add to that King was definitely helped in his worldview by people who we don't hear about anymore.
That's correct.
It was SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that told Dr. King straight up, told him to his face, stepped up to him and said, we love your nonviolence. It's killing us, though. And they said to him, Rap Brown being one of them, Stokely Carmichael, who was then called Kwame Ture, James Farmer, the Freedom Riders, and many of the so-called communists, said, listen, Dr. King, the truth is that this is an economic, a class movement as well as race movement. You've not mentioned that in your speech. speeches. It was, who was the gentleman who was with Mr. Abernathy, Bayard Rustin, who was gay and socialist, who told Dr. King, you have to get beyond race. It must be class. Let me tell you about some of these brothers.
But in Shawn the Greatest King, he not only got there, he brought everybody else there.
He brought
and even when the government wanted him to get rid of Rustin the radicals, Jack O'Dell, he wouldn't do it. That's why he was a great leader, because even when
he embodied the time. He embodied the time. But the one thing is, we must remember those other leaders. Because it's our ignorance where we don't recognize the Mexican American and South American leaders who died for land reform and agrarian reform. Our ignorance in American schools, we don't understand who Che really was, who Fidel really was, who Philip Marigueya was.
I was going to ask you about that.
Albizu Campos.
When we come back, it's interesting to me how black Americans stand with Fidel in many cases, and Cuban Americans hate him. When I go to Miami and they give me police security, it's because the Cuban population, they're mad at me for going to see Fidel Castro.
Yes, they are.
Keeping it real.
You know, when I was in the Young Lords, Al came to my office one day, and he said, "Man, I really admire you." And I heard he was a child preacher,
right?
And I heard he had the blood on him, and he's done well since then. God has blessed him.
Absolutely.
He blessed you too. You still here?
I'm still here.
Well, anyway, Felipe, in East Harlem, I worked with the sanitation department. They had a program called Model Cities.
Yes, I remember.
I worked with we worked with some of the young lords who were in East Harlem on cleaning up lots, and they were doing renovating old apartment buildings that were abandoned. They were doing they were actually learning how to do construction work.
Yes, sir.
And I used to go and I would meet with some of them and I would talk to them, man. And it was just they've been through a lot. They were out there gangbanging, but they decided to turn their life around and try to fix up and and do something in their community. And that I'll never forget, man.
It was wonderful. Listen, we used to dance together. We used to fight together. We used to love together. Now all we do is go to jail together, and then when we go to jail and get locked up, then we end up in separate bands, Latin Kings and the Bloods, Latin Nieta and the Crips. This is madness. Malcolm said it. You go to jail.
It's tribalism.
It's tribalism. It's exactly.
Play tribe against tribe.
Right. And until you get hit, you know what somebody told me about people who think they free? They need to be hungry for a little while. What happens is we have not, for some reason, our consumerism, our materialism, has caused us to seek another God.
Right.
I'm going to tell you a little revelation I had, Al. I was praying one day, and it came to me, and I'll say this very quickly. Felipe, you need to tell everybody you meet that I will give people of color, I'm going to give black people everything they want. I'm going to give them presidents. I'm going to give them governorships. I'm going to heads of corporations. I said, Father, why are you doing this? Because I always question. He said, hush and listen. I'm going to give them everything they want. If they remember the source, the moment they forget the source, it'll be taken away. He said, I'm not going to take it away. I'll leave them to their own devices.
I ain't even going to touch that. Let's go to Ted in Salt Lake City, Utah. Ted?
Thank you, Reverend Al. I just want you to know I'm a big supporter. Even though our politics might be a little different, you definitely have my support, and my hat's off to you standing in the line of fire for many of us in this country. My main point is I'm a business owner in Salt Lake City. I own a software consulting firm, got about 20 employees, and I'm a little confused at the approach to brown and black coalition, because I personally don't believe that there's much validity to that strategy. Just from looking at things in common, we don't have things in common. We have different politics. There's a trust problem. If I see Al Sharpton with 3 black people on a cause, and I see 3,000 on the other side of the room of Mexicans, Latinos, what have you, I'm still going to go see what Al Sharpton's talking about. And I think a lot of black Americans are the same. I just don't see how there's any validity to that approach in America today.
All right. Well, Ted's honest. Now, how do you answer that, Felipe?
Self-love is the beginning of all love. And so nationalism is not what's being debated here. You have to love yourself. I love being a black Puerto Rican. Now, I happen to have 2 worlds that I have allegiance to, but no one is saying that you're not supposed to love yourself first. I distrust anyone who comes up to me and says, I love everybody, and doesn't love his mama, his daddy, and his people first. No. We're not discussing this. Revolutionary nationalism demands that you first love your own. But revolutionary nationalism has to evolve into internationalism. If it does not, it is not revolutionary, and it certainly isn't Christian. So all I'm suggesting is it has to move beyond that. First, you love yourself. No one gets mad at Jews for loving themselves. No one gets mad at Irish Americans or Italian Americans for loving themselves. But if they get myopic, if they choose to move into that hole, into that vortex that says we the only ones in the earth, you got a problem. In the end, there is a race. It's called human, and that's where we have to go. At this point, we're fighting melanin, no doubt about it. But please do not use history as a bulwark for your argument that we can't get this together. History proves that Native Americans and black folk did get it together, and that's why Andrew Jackson never defeated the Seminoles in Florida.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. A few more minutes with Felipe Luciano. Keeping it real. Sharpton. We'll be right back.